All right. I'm with Ted Frank, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome. So good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today, Ted?
I can't complain.
Yeah. I've been following you for years actually. Can you just give us a brief kind of overview of who you are, what you do?
Sure, I'm an attorney, and 15 or so, 16, 17 years ago, I started a project that's turned into a nonprofit law firm. Most of what it does is go after bad actors in the class action settlement space that structure class action settlements to pay the attorneys, but not the class, or otherwise overpay the attorneys.
Mm.
And we're the only ones doing that, and we've had some tremendous success uh, making a difference and making class action settlements better for people. We've won a few $100 million for consumers and shareholders and some good precedents. I've gotten to argue in the Supreme Court, fun stuff like that.
Fun.
And um, we've expanded to going after bad actors in other places. This is the Hamilton Lincoln Law Institute, HLLI.org, and we sue state governments that are violating the First Amendment or seeking to ban political parody. Uh, we've gone after NGOs that engage in the civil terrorism of road blockades on behalf of Hamas or whatever it is that they're claiming to be interested in, but really what they're interested in is just antisocial destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a couple of those suits pending, and you know it's a fun gig. We got 6, 7 attorneys working for us, and uh, cases all over the country.
It's crazy to me that you're the only people really who go after the class action, just the bad actors in class action. It seems like that would be, very open to being corrupted.
We could easily do twice as much if we had twice the funding, but you know we only have so many attorneys, and there are many more bad class action settlements out there than we have the resources to tackle.
And
And so every month we're triaging that.
wow. And when you say bad class action settlements, it's just basically the lawyers are taking most of the pot that they receive.
Sure. So we just won a case in the Second Circuit where it was a settlement over flushable wipes. They were willing to settle it where the class would get less than $1 million, but the attorneys would get paid $3, $4 million.
Wow.
Uh, and well, if these flushable wipes are so bad, they've destroyed plumbing, what have you. Why is the class only getting these $5, $10 checks for so few people are getting these checks, and why are the attorneys getting so much more than what the class is getting? Uh, we have another settlement against Google that I argued in the Ninth Circuit a month or two ago, and the class is literally getting zero,
Wow.
and instead they're giving tens of millions of dollars, over $40 million, to the ACLU, to Harvard with its $50 billion endowment,
Mhm.
and the class is not a bunch of ACLU supporters, so it's just odd that this is what they're doing on behalf of the class. And it seems like a very bad conflict of interest, especially given that class counsel sits on the board of the ACLU, and class counsel is getting $19 million themselves for getting the class zero. It's so some outrages like that.
And what was the class fighting Google for?
This was something Google had already settled with state AGs for, where they had promised on your phone that they would, you could turn off location tracking, but then Google was tracking your location anyway.
Oh, okay. Okay. I mean, I feel like everyone's tracking us at all times now. It's so crazy. That was one of the things that came out during the BLM protests, riots, whatever it ended up being, was just how much of that information was being sold to third parties because they were able to determine who was at these protests not necessarily, I mean, individual information wasn't released, but basically your everything else about you, all the other stuff. It was crazy. And that's when people were like, this is nuts. It's mostly white people at these. I was like, more importantly, why do these third parties have all of this information from our cell phones? That's wild to me. Just today I saw something that we transfer, it's interesting with all the AI stuff. I saw something that in WeTransfer's new terms of service, basically they own everything that you transfer so that they can sell it for AI to train on, which is
Hmm.
nuts.
Well, ChatGPT now saves all of your conversations, and the New York Times is about to get access to all of that in their copyright case against ChatGPT. So it's not clear what's being done to protect the privacy of third parties in that.
It doesn't seem like anything is being done to protect the privacy. What drives me crazy as someone who's on YouTube and creates content is I'm pretty aware they're scraping all of this stuff to train AI. And then we'll get hit with a copyright violation for something that's 3 seconds long, even if we're parodying it, even if it's something that we'll use a clip from the news, and then they'll come after us. And all these companies are kind of merged together, or we'll get the recent thing that's a lot more insidious is it's music that's Muzak, clearly kind of made by AI or a robot, copywritten by these companies, and then you get a copyright violation. It's not so bad that you'll get a strike. They just use it as a reason to demonetize you. And it's nuts. So you have no recourse. You're basically like, oh, so you're just going to use this so you don't have to pay any creators while you scrape all of our content to train your AI. That doesn't seem fair to me.
Yeah, eventually there'll be a market for a platform that doesn't do that. But uh, you know, um, hypothetically, you're supposed to get an opportunity to respond to DMCA takedown notices, and if the takedown notice is issued baselessly, you should have a cause of action against the people demanding your stuff be taken down when you've just engaged in fair use.
This wasn't
Uh,
even a takedown notice. Recently we got one that was just copyright. It wasn't even a strike. It was just a copyright violation. And it was you never would have even known this was copywritten music because it sounds like just basic, AI generated elevator music. And it was on another reel that we were sharing. And they didn't even give us, usually they'll give you the option to edit it out or to change it. They didn't even give us the option to edit it out. They just demonetized the channel and said, demonetize not the channel, the video, the individual video, and that was it. We really had no recourse. We were like, well, this is new. Like every day it's something new. But that was the first time where we didn't have the option to just edit that video out or and anything. They just used it to demonetize the whole video.
well, can you repost the video with new edits
I mean,
or?
we probably could have, but this was after it had already had tens of thousands of views.
Oh, I see.
So
So
it
you
wasn't
lost.
even, normally it'll show up even pretty early sometimes. And when you upload it, it'll say it'll kind of warn you that there's music that's copyright. There's usually some sense that you have that there's copyright, especially around music when you're
Mm-hmm.
uploading and going to post. Sometimes it'll come through, but this was a full 24 hours later. And so then, and there's also this once you kind of upload something and then re-upload I think that it's just not, it would be like if someone else uploaded the same video somewhere else, it just wouldn't do as well because it's a
The
copy.
algorithms. Yeah. All right.
So yeah, we just kind of ate it, but that's interesting to me. And I saw this recently with Spotify having their AI band that they were pushing, and people were saying there was no evidence that this band existed anywhere. And a lot of musicians are saying this is how Spotify is going to kind of get away with not having to pay musicians, is by pushing all these AI bands that don't really exist that
Mm-hmm.
they've created.
I mean, it's interesting. Definitely interesting.
Yeah, I'm not
Uh,
sure where I feel like there will be lawsuits, but I have no idea what they would even be around other than just humans being, used for content and then screwed out of being paid for it because they're technically training the AI, but it's then the AI comes up with something original.
well, as more and more AI content suffuses the web, eventually the AIs are just going to get trained on themselves, and the quality is going to go down.
Well, I wrote a piece actually that's out, I think today, for Spectator about internet theory. Have you heard about this conspiracy theory?
Right.
So
No, go ahead.
they have found that, like you said, it gets weird. Once they start training on themselves, it starts hallucinating and getting all crazy, and they do seem I'm Google or YouTube, I believe, just came out with all new policies that said you can't use all AI generated content. You will be demonetized if you do, because they had that video that had 400 million views and it was just AI slop. So they said you have to be creative, but I still feel like it's a selfish way for them they know they need that input to train.
Right.
So I
Right.
feel like they're like, "Oh, we're going to value our creators," while they actually are just like, "No, we need new content to train on." They're like, "You can use it creatively, but you can't just make AI slop and be rewarded for it on here." And that video was crazy because even in the comments, it was all clearly AI just commenting on AI, and it is that internet isn't a conspiracy, I don't think. I do see more and more people pulling away. I think another thing that I've been talking to normies about is the Epstein thing, the
Mm-hmm.
the discourse around it. And so many normies I know, it's anecdotal, of course, but they're just done. They're done with I feel like, and this is what I was saying in my piece, humans don't really they don't like being confused. They don't like knowing what's real and what's not real. I think they're getting a sense of uncanny valley, that sense of, is this thing real? To the whole internet in general, and they're pulling away from it. And the Epstein thing is a good example to me of people trying to get information, only really being able to find any conspiracy, and then just going throwing their hands up and saying, like, I'm just not even going to engage or pay attention. And in fact, I'm just going to go off social media entirely, which is what I've
Mm-hmm.
heard from about 10 people in the past 2 weeks.
No, there's been so much misinformation about Epstein alone, and everybody has their own bad incentives. And it's not like the administration is really, they're so embarrassed because they were the ones promoting this stuff in some cases for 8 years, that having to admit that there's nothing there, they just want it to go away. So they're not defending the situation and explaining, well, this is why we've been wrong for 8 years. They're just hoping it just goes away,
Mhm.
which um, you have a significant portion of Trump supporters who this was their holy grail for whatever reason. And you then have just bad actors now wanting to use it to attack Trump, to attack Jews, to attack whatever it is that they want to attack with various conspiracy theories. And the mainstream media is even seizing upon it because this was just a much better story with the fiction than with the reality. And so the fiction has been pushed for so long, from Netflix documentaries to news stories to what have you. And you dig down and you see how thinly sourced some of this is, and how it all wobbles on just a handful of just very not credible witnesses. Uh, it's pretty extraordinary. But the thing is that Epstein himself, he was such a liar and such a such a flamboyant character that even the reality is just it's all very hard to believe across the board.
It's very dark, that whole story. It's interesting. I just had Amanda Knox on, and I've been reading a lot about her story over the years, and I saw somebody, because recently the murderer actually is being tried again for more crime, and someone who is pretty reasonable and follows things pretty closely, he said, it was Wilford Riley, I think. He's usually pretty somewhat, like, paying attention to things, and he said something like, "Wait, so this whole story was BS?" I was like, "People really have no idea." They still have no idea about the when you hear her story, you look at the actual facts of that case and how insane it was, that the
She was
the
prosecuted at all.
the
Yeah.
crazy story they made up. It was like weird erotic fan fiction that somebody got in their head, and then we were talking when she came on the podcast about how much being in Italy and having this kind of Madonna horror mentality that's so pervasive in the culture, and having it be all of these people who are so determined to make her the whore, and the woman who was murdered the Madonna, and just it's really wild. It's really wild, the whole thing they constructed, that it was based on basically nothing. They had a murderer, and am shocked too that people still have no idea. They still think that she did it and got away with it.
Mm-hmm. And there are just a lot of narratives out there that are just completely false, and that the media, for political reasons or what have you, have promoted as completely false. So, people think that the Central Park Five are actually innocent, or that there are all sorts of stories like that. And I've sort of made it a fun hobby that every time a death penalty case comes down the road, and people are saying, "Oh, this person was actually innocent," to do the true crime deep dive, and no, these people aren't innocent. They were really caught, but the narrative gets out there that we're somehow executing a bunch of innocent people out of spite, and nobody is putting forward the counter narrative. The prosecutors' offices don't have the PR apparatus to do that. The DOJ doesn't have the interest in saying, here's what the actual evidence is. And, oh, by the way, Trump and Patel and Bongino had been lying to you for years. So nobody has the interest to tell that true story. They're the dogs that caught the car, that they had all these promises about what the FBI was covering up, and then they get put in charge of the FBI. And I guess in one sense it's a good sign that Trump is not the fascist that people accuse him of being, because it would have been really easy to just say, Bill Richardson is the bad guy here, and oh, he's dead, I guess he can't sue us and we can't prosecute him, too bad. And they're being forthright that he was falsely accused. So, but not just Bill Richardson. They could go after a variety of octogenarians who do not support the administration but associated with Epstein, and try to make them scapegoats, and they haven't done that, and it's to their credit.
Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? It is such a pain in the bum. If I want to get any sort of testing done to ensure I'm making my health a priority, I have to wait weeks for an appointment to see my doctor. Then I have to get a referral from her and wait weeks more for an appointment with the specialist I needed to see. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about. Then take those test results to my doctor, better armed with the information I need. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories, from allergies to heart health, hormones, sexual health, women's health tests for egg quantity, perimenopause, menopause, men's health tests for testosterone, prostate, and so much more. These are lab quality tests, the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office. So prioritize your health and visit questhealth.com today. Use the code Phetasy to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use code Phetasy for 25% off. I found you because I found myself, the conspiracies can be fun. They're fun, and Epstein didn't kill himself became a meme, and it was hilarious. And I found that what I knew from the stories that you heard about what happened to those women insanely dark and disturbing. And also because I was a bit of a disturbed teen myself, I was like, I totally would have ended up on Epstein's Island if I had lived in Florida at that time. I know it. And so there was that, me just recognizing my own, that I would have been kind of one of those people that he would have preyed on. And always wondering what happened. I always try to push back against what I want to believe, why I want to believe it. And it was very hard to find any kind of counter narrative to the conspiracy in this instance. It was actually nearly impossible until I stumbled upon, you had something that you posted years ago really breaking this down and saying, you had followed a lot of the civil suits pretty closely, and people were going to be disappointed to find out, and this was before they said there's no there, that there's no there. And can you explain why you felt the need to put that out into the world? And have you talked to anybody? Has anybody else had you on to talk about this? Like,
No, you're
Mark
the first.
Halperin or
I'm doing a second podcast later today, and
okay.
there just wasn't interest in debunking this until it actually got debunked. But I made the accurate prediction in January when they said, "Oh, we got the Epstein files. We got the Epstein files." I'm like, there's not going to be anything in the Epstein files. The government doesn't have anything that Boyce Schiller didn't have. Boyce Schiller was representing several of the victims, and you saw how those civil suits were going. They were suing banks for nothing more than Jeffrey Epstein was keeping money with you, and he was withdrawing a lot of it here and there. And from that, you should have realized he was running a trafficking scheme and shut it down. And, we don't want banks looking into our lives like that. We don't want banks to be debanking us on weird suspicions. I've paid a lot of attention to debanking over the years, both because I've seen conservatives being debanked and because I've moved in gambling circles, and it's a concern when gamblers get debanked. And one day Venmo cut me off, and I have no idea why Venmo cut me off. But banks already are very aggressive in cutting people off, and that the bank ended up paying hundreds of millions of dollars because they did not cut off Epstein. It just seemed like a very bad precedent. But the fact that they were going after the banks as deep pockets for being tertiarily responsible, right? They weren't trafficking. All they were doing was Epstein put his money in the bank, and they shouldn't have let him do that. They should have debanked him, and and that creates liability for them. Was, I just thought, insane. But it also showed me that they don't have anybody real to sue. Right? They have the Epstein estate, and that's been paid out to the victims, and that's fine, and that's justice. They had they've been going after, lawyers who worked for the estate. We don't need to get into that, but what I found remarkable was you had all these dozens of victims, and this was the Me Too era. And every other time, some celebrity got caught with something, it was never just one person, right? Bill Cosby gets accused of rape, and dozens of women come forward and say, "Yep, that was his MO." And various Harvey Weinstein, same thing. Lots of victims come forward and say, "Nope, that was his MO," and he was casting couch and all this and the other. And the Epstein victims pretty consistently told a consistent story. He'd pay me a few $100s to do a massage, and the massages got more and more sexual. And then he'd pay me a few $100s more to introduce some of my friends to him, and we thought it was a good deal, and we did that. And some women were traumatized, and some women were just happy to have the money. And these are crimes, and these are perversions, and he suffered consequences for them, and he suffered more consequences for them once the second prosecution happened, and he ultimately killed himself rather than spend the rest of his life in jail over it. But what wasn't happening was you had this one victim who, for whatever reason, just named everybody. It's Prince Philip, it's Alan Dershowitz, it's Marvin Minsky, it's Bill
Beyonce.
Richardson, it's world leaders just swooping in to have sex with me as a 16, 17-year-old. And not only that, but Epstein paid me $15,000 to have sex with Prince Philip, and wow, that's surprising. He wasn't paying anybody else $15,000, and nobody else claims that they were having sex with Prince Philip and lots of other celebrities and politicians and officials. And there are only two suits out of that, one against Prince Philip, and Prince Philip settles after he gives his disastrous BBC interview because it's just embarrassing to have been hanging out with all of Epstein and his models. It's very unseemly for the royal family to do that, and the royal family is in precarious. It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that is politically precarious because all it takes is one government to say, why do we have kings and royalty, and why are we spending all this taxpayer dollars to support them? And so you can see why that's settled. But when she accuses Alan Dershowitz defends himself and says, this never happened. And she eventually has to drop the suit. It wasn't even like an attempt at a shakedown. Everybody just sort of slunk away and agreed, oh, she must have made a mistake. But then there weren't other suits against all these other alleged world leaders that she was sleeping with. But it was still enough for a Netflix documentary. And then just basically the whole legend of this concierge child pornography service comes in. And it's not clear, but apparently 19% of Americans believe that there is a conspiracy among the elites to just molest children. And maybe that's just sort of residual from the Catholic Church scandals or Boy Scout scandals. That, it must be politicians too, or it's just something that all powerful people do. And maybe I have too rosy a view of humanity. I think it's just a handful of sick people. And, wars have changed, and it's good that we're not sweeping it under the rug anymore, but we had decades of people sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things to me is that the people who are yelling about this, I didn't really hear them yelling very much about Boy Scouts, for example. They're that seems like a massive scandal if you really look at it and the numbers and the people who are affected. And I don't hear people being like, where are the binders? I do feel like it's captured people's imaginations. I don't know a lot of answers to things like how many. Somebody said the other day, well, people, they might have got, they didn't go there for that reason, but then once they got there were all these young girls, and that's why they continued to go there. And they knew it was kind of part of the deal. But how many of these people were going after he was charged? Was it still a lot of people who were going there?
Um, I don't have the timeline of
Yeah.
individual visits. I mean, certainly after his conviction, he found it harder to network.
Mhm.
And he certainly tried to continue to network and was able to take meetings with Bill Gates. But that none of that lasted very long because everyone, it all woke up again in around 2017 when Trump appointed Alex Acosta to be Secretary of Labor, and people trying to find something to hit Trump with um, noted that Acosta was the federal prosecutor who cut the deal with Epstein without consulting the victims, which he was hypothetically supposed to do, though um, there was a lot of litigation over that he was eventually cleared of. But that you're supposed to do it, but it doesn't give the victims any right to sue. Um, and and full disclosure here, when I was a baby lawyer and Alex Acosta was a baby lawyer, we had offices close to each other at the same law firm and had lunch together occasionally. And we've been distant acquaintances ever since. But that to see him getting dragged through the mud on that, and I looked. That's when I started looking into it, and just objectively, it was a reasonable situation for the federal prosecutors to do at the time. Uh, you have very limited resources as a federal prosecutor, especially in the Southern District of Florida, which is a hub for a lot of illegal immigration and a hub for a lot of drug issues. So they have real crime that they're dealing with. And you had this pathetic old guy getting massages from 17-year-olds who's already being prosecuted by the state. And yes, it's a federal crime also, but the grand jury is returning indictments for something that won't even result in federal jail time under the existing sentencing guidelines. And he's got very powerful lawyers. He's hired Dershowitz, he's hired Ken Starr. It's the mid 2000s, that 2006, 2007 range. And there are commerce clause issues at the time because it's not clear that the Constitution allows the federal government to prosecute purely local. I went to the local high school and recruited a teenager to give me a sexual massage.
Mhm.
And if they weren't crossing state lines, it was hard to say what the federal interest was. And there was a threat from Epstein's lawyers to take that to the Supreme Court, and so they're making their own triage decision. We have limited resources. Do we put all of this on in the pre-Me Too era, where you have victims who were getting paid, and not just getting paid, but recruiting other quote unquote victims who are victims because it's statutory rape, but there wasn't the evidence of coercion that we have since heard
Right.
at the time. Um, and uh, but in the pre-Me Too era, these were not sympathetic victims. They were all fairly troubled teens, which
Mm.
is how he was recruiting them. They had recruited other teens, and now a lot of them were engaged in civil litigation where their motives could be questioned because they had millions of dollars at stake if they pursued their civil litigation. So they could be discredited in front of a jury like that. And so you're looking at a tough jury trial in the Preme Too Era, where it wasn't clear that they'd be able to get a conviction, and if they did get a conviction, they wouldn't get jail time because he didn't have a criminal record, a criminal history. And is this a good use of federal resources when it's going to get taken up to the Supreme Court
Mm.
on whether the federal charges are even constitutional when there hasn't been any crossing of state lines? And maybe they could have devoted more resources to it and tried to determine whether there was more to it than that. But I think they pretty accurately determined that this was just one guy's particular perversion, and this is bad. But there's a state prosecution happening, and he's going to get jail time, and he's going to get sex offender status. And then I think they were surprised at how well Epstein manipulated the state system so that his punishment seems pretty light.
Mm.
Very little time actually in prison and the rest under house arrest. Um, but,
So,
even with the second indictment, they don't indict him for acts that happened after that conviction. There don't seem to have been new teenage victims after the conviction. Um, this is all from the first decade of the century.
how many people were there? Victims?
Uh, the DOJ release says over 1,000.
Wow.
Now, whether they're counting, we know that now that Epstein had a child pornography collection. It's not
Mm.
clear how much of that was self-produced videos of the massages. It's not clear whether he was obtaining child pornography from third parties
Got it.
that he had nothing to do with. So when they say over 1,000 victims, I don't know whether that's including people on third party child pornography or just the people he was molesting.
And Alex Acosta, that's his name, correct?
Yes,
Is he the one? Why do I know that name? Is that the one that who's
he was the federal prosecutor
how does it
who
come into like the whole Mossad thing?
Acosta has nothing to do with
Oh,
Mossad. But
okay.
what happened is there were a couple of reporters claimed to be quoting people who talked to Alex
Got
Acosta,
it. Okay, that's why
and
I
and
connected that.
Acosta allegedly told them, "I pulled back because I was told to back off because he was intelligence." He
Mm.
doesn't say Mossad ever, or not even the stories say Mossad. But then Acosta says that those stories aren't accurate. I didn't say that. And and when Acosta, trying to save his job as Secretary of Labor, trying to, facing an Office of the Inspector General investigation over the original plea deal, because he gets reported for that and could face some really severe sanctions to his career. And at no time does he say, no, 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 my hands were tied. I got leaned upon by my superiors to back off. And he never says that. He says, no, this was an internal decision, that this was going to take a lot of resources that could be better spent going after other criminals who, and we weren't going to make that much of a marginal
Mhm,
difference because
mhm.
he had only been indicted for things that wouldn't result in new jail time. So we could cut a deal that ensured that he would plead guilty to the state charges, that he would get state punishment, that he would get sex offender status, that we wouldn't face a constitutional challenge for 8 years over whether or not we're allowed to prosecute for purely local sex trafficking. And
And they were
and
okay with that.
we were okay with that.
Yeah.
And again, it's the pre-Me Too era. They're judging what is this trial going to look like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to look like a mess. All of these witnesses are going to get cross-examined. Isn't it true that you accepted money? Isn't it true that you kept coming back? Isn't it true that you talked to 3 of your friends and you encouraged them to do it? Isn't it true that you're suing Epstein and that if he's convicted, you're going to get much more money? And there's just, I think, federal prosecutors make these decisions all the time, and the decision was made in this particular case. We're okay with the state prosecution because he's pleading guilty, and whether they still would have made that decision if they knew what the state sentence would be, we'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there was a sense that they thought that he was going to face more punishment in state court.
So,
Um,
what are the
but
most common things that you hear and kind of your I was saying I don't know when you're kind of pushing back against a lot of the stuff people come at you with. What are the things that you hear the most that you have to debunk? What's the
sure. So first of all, Epstein was a BS artist, right?
Mhm.
He's going around telling people, "Oh, I'm with the CIA. Oh, I'm with Mossad," or people are claiming that he told them these things and then he's denying them. But he certainly lied a lot, right? We know that he lied about being a Victoria's Secret talent agent as he's trying to seduce models, and we know that as he's promoting his philanthropy, he's lying about Bill Gates being heavily involved in his philanthropy when Gates wasn't. Um, and we know that like he likes bragging and collecting celebrities and bringing them in and and giving money to academic institutions and bringing in their leading scientists to dine with him at his big ranch, and then he gets to lecture them about his autodidactic scientific theories, and everybody politely nods because this is the multi-million-dollar donor to your school, and this is the price of getting to stay at a nice ranch. You listen to the crazy guy talk, and but so you have all of that, which sort of creates but then how does this guy who doesn't have a college degree make so much money?
Mhm.
And you do have this whole weird Leslie Wexner connection, where Epstein's been bouncing around, and he grew up at a time where his resume is just unthinkable to us now, where you can drop out of college and then get hired to teach math and science at the leading high school in New York, where you're teaching at the leading high school in New York and you meet the son of the CEO of Bear Stearns, and the CEO of Bear Stearns will hire you to work on the trading floor. And you can work your way up from the trading floor to a lucrative position uh, in finance and make a lot of money, and then go from there, get kicked out of Bear Stearns without getting prosecuted for SEC violations, and go on and do all sorts of other financial shenanigans and make a lot of money.
I mean, when you put
Um,
it like that, you can kind of understand why people think he's intelligent.
I, I mean, it's a very weird resume. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't fault them for believing this, especially in a
no,
time when so many conspiracies end up
and
being
you especially
true.
don't believe it when there is mainstream media. Just you have this originally very badly sourced story, and everybody now thinks it was Steve Bannon who quote unquote leaked this. And what the hell does Steve Bannon know about the vetting process for cabinet officials. But Steve Bannon leaks to Vicky Ward. Aosta explained his whole Epstein thing by saying Epstein was intelligence and Bush told him to back off, uh, which doesn't. That whole story doesn't appear to be true, but that has been through the game of telephone has been repeated. Aosta admitted that Epstein was intelligence.
Mm.
And you even have Megyn Kelly just yesterday saying it's on record. Aosta said on the record that, and you have claims like that it just becomes this fact, quote unquote,
Right.
that this misinformation in the record. And that it's not clear. So the theory is then that he's running this honeypot operation and that he's somehow being paid hundreds of millions of dollars by intelligence to do this. Do we know intelligence to be paying people hundreds of millions of dollars to run honeypot operations? That doesn't seem like a very good use of money or realistic scenario, or it's a movie kind of thing.
Yeah.
But why would you hire somebody so erratic to do that?
I guess the theory
Especially
is that it would be to
when
manipulate
somebody who's
government.
not even above it and is molesting the teenagers himself. And what's in it for Mossad?
Well, the argument is that, as far as I understand it, to use the United States like a puppet. Isn't this what
Right.
the argument is?
The Jews are puppet masters,
Right. I've never heard that before.
you're seeing Tucker Carlson and other anti-Semites now playing this theory up. The same people who are happy to defend Andrew Tate are now saying that Jews are puppet masters and engaging in pedophilia rings to entrap all the pedophiles running the government and force them to support Israel when they wouldn't want to anyway. And the theory makes no sense. Israel had, until very recently, 80% support among the American people. And except in very far left districts, you could not be openly anti-Israel and have a political career. It was just something that would be held against you and was politically damaging. And you didn't need Mossad to blackmail you to support Israel. It was just in everybody's political interest to support Israel, aside from the fact that it's just generally the right thing. This is a country that's very like the United States, that has a lot of ties to the United States, that has a lot of Americans living in it, that has a special resonance among the Judeo-Christian history of the United States, is the only democracy in that entire region that has steadfastly supported us and given us intelligence that has helped us save thousands of American lives from terrorist attacks. And of course, we support Israel. And it's frankly dumbfounding to me that in the wake of October 7th, we have people who are supporting Hamas versus Israel, or Iran versus Israel. And the idea that Israel couldn't do this without blackmailing people just is dumbfounding and just contradicts common sense. A lot of this just contradicts common sense. Like, it seems impossible that Epstein was making this much money, but he was just overcharging people. He was scamming. He's a scam artist,
Yeah.
and he wiled his way into Les Wexner's inner circle and got Les Wexner to sign over all of his financial control to Epstein, and then Epstein milks him for tens of millions of dollars. And well, Epstein must have been uh, blackmailing Wexner, except Wexner is going out and publicly accusing Epstein of bilking him for $46 million. And well, that's not consistent with having this sort of Damocles of Epstein having compromise on you. It is consistent with the story of Epstein wiling his way into Wexner's inner circle and cutting off of all of other Wexner's friends, and then milking him for tens of millions of dollars that he wasn't entitled to, but was able to do legally because Wexner, for whatever reason, exhibited poor judgment and signed over his finances to this guy.
I wonder
And
too, like, sorry to interrupt. I wonder too how much, you keep saying like in the pre-Me Too era, and it's been making me, I'm from the pre-Me Too era. And there was this kind of moment where I would be working with young girls who were teens or 19. We'd be waiting tables, and I was much older, and they just didn't put up with any shit from managers, from bus, or from anybody that they were, and I was like, you guys, like, it's just a slap on the ass. And they're like, oh, just because you old bags put up with all that doesn't mean we need to. And it made me realize there had been just a dramatic shift in the psyches of society, of men, and also of women, in what was and wasn't acceptable. There was, like, I because one of the criticisms that you hear is like, well, these world leaders were going there, and there were all these young 16, 17-year-old girls, and I kind of like, I don't know, that wasn't that weird in the 90s. Like, I was hanging out with lots of guys who should not have been hanging out with 17-year-old girls at all. That wasn't like a it just wasn't as, um,
well, also they
I
wouldn't
don't
have had wristbands, and he had lots of 20-something models there, right?
right,
Clinton was got a neck massage from a 23-year-old, and
right,
everybody points to that photo of Clinton getting massaged by a beautiful young woman, except the woman was 23, and they interview her, and she says, "Oh, so he was a perfect gentleman, and I was happy to have my photo taken with him."
right.
And uh, and so, all right, you have this rich guy who's offering me his plane, who's offering me this island, and he's doing it because he's a star fucker, and likes the frisson of hanging out with politicians and celebrities, and it and likes having these dinner salons where lots of academics show up, and he gets to lecture them about his scientific theories, and
Uh,
um,
I mean, I've been around so
and he
many
also
famous
likes
people.
models. He's a rich guy. He
Yeah,
likes models.
exactly. I don't
I
know,
mean,
a lot of it.
Soros was dating 20 something models. Bloomberg was dating 20 something models.
Mhm.
Old men date 20
Belichick
something
is
models when
dating
they
a 24-year-old.
I'm sorry?
That Belichick is dating a 24-year-old or whatever
Belichick is
right
dating a
now.
24-year-old now.
Yeah. It's not,
And
it's weird that, yeah, it's like that simplest explanation is often that's why it was hard for me to find anything. I was like, what's the simplest explanation? Okay, take away all the, like, conspiracies that I've ingested about this, and I watched the very dark, documentary, I think, on Netflix that was upsetting, and so emotionally, I'm like, I understand how these poor girls, it is, like, horrific. When you hear a lot of their stories, it's horrific, and then I'm like, well, what's the simplest explanation? And being in LA for 17 years, being around famous people who just literally, I will like, have people around them tell them whatever the fuck they want to hear. Sorry about the language. It's just it's, I was joking the other day. I'm like, being famous is like talking to Chat GPT. Like, it's just like, yeah, well, that's a great idea. You're brilliant. I love that. It's everywhere you go, people are just affirming your worldview, and you're surrounding yourself with, yeah, it's like, this is not a new story at all. But I understand It is weird too to watch, like, the whole right wing go fully Me Too right now, because they were so like, "Me Too's gone too far," and I'm like, "Well, clearly you don't think it went far enough because you all sound like people in the height of Me Too at the moment."
Well,
And
it's what about the children
oh, I
aspect of
can't
it?
this is where it's like, I don't you can believe conspiracies, you can be mad, you can feel I think people, this is something that when all institutional trust has collapsed, this is you're gonna say, well, clearly, yes, the world is operated by a cabal of rich people who are all pedophile. It makes more sense than believing that incompetence and power and ego collapsed all of our institutions because it's a better story for people to believe. And I don't know. It's definitely I also understand when you have things like the Catholic Church and the Boy Scouts, like why there's been a lot of damage that's been done. And Epstein himself and Ghislaine. And it is weird to me though, like you say, that none of these women really implicate anyone else. And is there a reason that they couldn't if they were going after him, is there a reason they couldn't try
No,
and
of
go
course.
after someone else?
I mean, Joffrey, who got the Netflix documentary and was the one accusing the most people and tragically committed suicide a few months ago. Um, Perhaps because she understood that her story was about to be blown up. Um, but was
I mean, it doesn't help with the
clearly a very
conspiracies.
troubled person,
Mhm.
and she falsely accused Dershowitz, and I believe she falsely accused a lot of other men, and I think it's even you know plausible that she falsely accused Philip, but if that went to a jury, the jury in the Me Too era, it's hard to see how Philip would have won in that jury, and he very reasonably settled, given what a bad witness he would have been. Um, the but that Me Too attitude really is what gave the story credibility. Well, you have this
Well,
poor
there's
woman
also the
who's
reporting by that woman down in Miami who broke a lot of
right,
these
but she
stories.
never right. She. But her story was, hey, this guy's molesting a lot of children, and why the heck did he get such a slap on the wrist?
Right.
And the answer is that the federal people gave him a slap on the wrist because they thought there was going to be a legitimate state prosecution and a state
And
guilty plea and a state sentence, and then for whatever corrupt politics there were, and that might merit some investigation, uh, he got a very very short sentence.
mhm. All of this is very sketchy though. Like it is.
And that's absolutely sketchy. And in hindsight, what Acosta did looks sketchy, which is why it cost him his job at as Secretary of Labor, and why he faced an OIG investigation that eventually cleared him, and just was critical that he should have told the victims. Um, but the explanation was it was a 2007, 2008, 2009 era prosecution that would have looked a lot different in
Right.
2017. And we know that because in from 2017 to 2020, they did go after Epstein and they threw him in jail, and he clearly understood he wasn't ever going to see freedom again. And
This is where I think Me Too was good.
and Me Too was good in that sense. The backlash that it engendered, I think, went too far, and some innocent people were falsely accused.
Mhm.
And And let's hope that the backlash to the backlash doesn't go too far in the other direction.
Right.
Let's hope we reach a nice equilibrium where women are believed exactly the amount that they should be.
Yeah, I was not really on board with the believe
But
all women stuff.
um, in 1993, when I was in law school, there was a case, and it was a pretty notorious case because a woman goes in and sues. She sues Jimmy Carter. She sues Bill Clinton, who she claims is Jimmy Carter's secret son. And she sues a host of other people, and she says they're running a vast death hunting slave camp conspiracy to breed young black women, and they've killed millions of black women and are engaging in sexual slavery.
Mm.
And the judge throws the case out of court and says, "This is so wildly crazy and implausible. We're not going to pay attention to it." And it's not that different than what Virginia Joffrey was alleging, and not that different than what Joe Biden's accuser was alleging. And everybody sort of recognized, okay, this woman isn't to be believed. And you had other, right? You had Obama being accused of raping a man, and everybody understood this guy is deranged, and the allegations make no sense. And you just famous people attract mentally ill, delusional allegations.
Mm-hmm.
And with Geoffrey, who actually was molested by Epstein, as best we can tell, had more credibility than these other crazy allegations because something had happened to her, and whether that something caused the mental break or the mental break was why she was recruited in the first place or what have you. On top of that, she made all these other accusations and was fortunate enough to have a photo of her with Prince Philip so that her allegations against Prince Philip had that much additional credibility. And Prince Philip helped that case by giving such a bad interview at the BBC. And so she got millions of dollars from that. But that's the interesting thing, right? If other victims had come forward and said, oh, yeah, we were getting farmed out to Prince Philip, we were getting farmed out to Alan Dershowitz, we were getting farmed out to Marvin Minsky, and right, all it would have taken is another 2 or 3 women to say the same thing that Virginia Joffrey was saying, and money would have flowed.
Yeah.
Because, okay, maybe one woman's lying, but all of these women are lying.
Yeah.
And they absolutely had the financial incentive to do that, and somehow that never happened.
Yeah, that was always the weird thing.
Conclude that that the problem here was Virginia Joffrey, not a very well kept secret of CIA agents telling women to shut up. Go ahead and collect your money from Epstein and the banks, but don't you dare go after Bill Richardson. And Bill Richardson's not that powerful. Marvin Minsky's not that powerful.
Yeah.
They don't have the power of JP Morgan Chase that had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars.
Which is crazy. I still don't even understand that. That makes no sense to me. Is it just they wanted to just wash their hands? It was just like
they didn't want a multi-week trial.
Yeah.
Epstein Chase.
Yeah.
And one advantage civil lawyers have over prosecutors, they just have to do the best job possible. At least the ethics of the current legal profession are, you can tell really fantastical, implausible stories as long as you can twist the evidence to support it, and if you can get a jury to agree with you, you were in the right. And prosecutors are supposed to be above that. So you had lawyers with millions of dollars at stake who had every incentive to uncover the vast conspiracy that's being alleged here, and they couldn't do it. And even and right, if you could have sued the CIA for this, holy cow,
Yeah.
that's billions, right? If you can get 600 million from Chase Morgan just for holding Epstein's checking account, what could you get from the CIA if they were actually behind this, if they were doing this to blackmail political leaders?
Now, is the
And
conspiracy that JP Morgan paid them out so that these leaders weren't found out? Is this part of
I
it?
mean, then what's the incentive for JP Morgan to do that, right? But uh,
I
maybe
can
somebody
see how
can have that
I can
congressional
see how
hearing.
people go crazy
Right.
with this.
Once you have a non-falsifiable conspiracy theory, then everything is just further evidence of the conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
What a joke we had in the last few weeks. Man dies, goes to
Oh, yeah,
heaven,
I saw this. I love this joke.
uh, and sees God and says, "You can ask me one question." And the man asks God, "Who killed JFK?" And he says, "Oh, that's easy. It was Lee Harvey Oswald. He acted alone." And the man goes, "This goes deeper than I thought."
Such a great
And
joke.
that that's the problem when you have the conspiratorial mindset. There's just no evidence um, that can persuade you.
Right, right.
Um,
I mean, I'm very grateful that I'm married to a man who is so, reasonable. You know, he's very much like the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. And he understands how, particularly with the lack of institutional trust, all of these, people being harmed by places like the church and Boy Scouts, coupled with Me Too, coupled with COVID and the failure there, and the mainstream media, calling things conspiracies that were the simplest explanation, which I think messed
and it's
with.
tough here because the simplest explanation isn't all that simple.
Yeah.
It's really the case that a college dropout could talk Les Wexner into giving him tens of millions of dollars just like that. It's really the case that this college dropout could chum up with Leon Black and say, "Oh, here's how I can save you $1 billion by changing the way your trusts are set up for your children, and now I'm going to charge you $150 million for that." It's really the case that Wexner gave this guy one of the best townhouses in Manhattan, and it's really an implausible story. And the answer is this guy was just the greatest con man of his generation, except for Donald Trump
Or Bernie Madoff.
or Bernie Madoff. Um,
Do you
but
think that Trump is a um him being if he I guess it's like if you think that, like you said, if he's the greatest con man of his generation other than Donald Trump, why wouldn't Donald Trump be willing to make this go away if he was implicated, as everybody's kind of
well,
alleging?
I mean, that's the thing, right? Donald Trump is one of the reasons that this story is as big as it is. In 2016, I said, Clinton was flying on that plane, and Epstein was doing some pretty crazy things on that plane. Clinton must be involved. And he had no reason to believe Clinton was involved, and Clinton had already denied everything, and the flight manifests were already public, and everybody knew that Clinton flew on the plane. And there are photos of Clinton with Kevin Spacey, who had his own sex problems later, and Epstein together. And there's a photo of Clinton getting massaged by a 23-year-old woman, and um, and Trump's using this to damn Clinton and Hillary, and nobody said, well, if Trump was implicated in all this, that's a pretty dumb thing for him to do, is to sort of, not only bring Epstein to the forefront of the political conversation, but then to hire Alex Acosta as a cabinet secretary to ensure that it will come up in congressional hearings,
Right.
and to give people who are anti-Trump an impetus to sort of reopen this story and wonder why Acosta cut that plea deal. Right, those stories don't come up if Acosta isn't serving in the Trump administration. And because those stories came up because here's a way we can go after Donald Trump, is to go after him over his cabinet secretary pick. And Acosta got tossed overboard as soon as that became a political liability. But again, it's Trump who brought this to the forefront in 2016 and again in 2017 by appointing Acosta, and again in 2021. Like, I'm going to hire all these guys who have put Epstein as the front of their agenda. And now I'm going to shut them down. Like, why is Patel going along with that? If that's really what's happening, why is Patel has every incentive to blow the whistle on something? So who is more powerful than Trump to, he has this huge egg on his face over this, and now he has his own connections to Epstein, right? Because there are photographs of him, and he acknowledged partying with him. And Epstein in his dying days was very happy to give interviews, trying to take credit for how good a friend he was with Donald Trump, which is probably more BS from Epstein. But it's like, who is it that's shutting this down? If it's Trump himself, why the hell was Trump making sure it had to be shut down by putting it at the forefront of his campaign in 2016 and at the forefront of the news cycle in 2017 to 19, and again in 2021? It seems very foolhardy to put himself in a situation where he'd have to shut it down later. So it has to be somebody more powerful than Trump who is shutting this down, and having Patel humiliate himself and Bongino humiliate himself and Bondi humiliate themselves when they would be political heroes for bringing somebody powerful to justice.
Yeah.
And like, it's not like Trump is so enmeshed in the establishment that he wouldn't be happy to burn somebody. He was happy to criticize Koch. He was happy to burn Leonard Leo. Mm-hmm. He's happy to criticize other donors. He's absolutely trampled through the GOP establishment, and the GOP is now Trump, for better or worse. And the idea that that somebody above Trump shut this down, who the heck is that powerful that they could get Trump to shut this down?
The Jew. I mean,
yeah, exactly. There you go.
Some of it does feel very, there's a lot of it that's like what animates this, and it does feel generational to me as well. Like, I was talking to somebody about, I'm like, who cares about this actually? Who voted for Trump and was like, this is my number one. This is why I'm voting for Trump. And I talked to a family member who's pretty blue collar and is like a competent, been pro-Trump kind of since the early 2016 days. And I said, are you and your buddies sitting around talking about this? And now, granted, again, when I say generational, he's in his 40s. So he was like, no. And he said something that really stuck out to me. He said, we're all talking about how much we're going to get back on overtime because of the big, beautiful bill. And that has real life effects for them. And he said, I feel like people who talk for a living overestimate how much people who don't talk for a living care about this. And it was such a perfect distillation of, what I hear and see in normie world versus what I see online. But then someone pushed back and said, "No, the younger people really do care about this. Under a certain age, this is a
Right, the
big thing
people who've
for
grown up
them."
on Netflix and haven't learned how to tell that they're being lied to and are good at sussing out disinformation. And it's hard to suss out the disinformation here. Like, I mean, it's crazy that this relatively minor lawyer with 30,000 followers on Twitter is the only source you can go to get a good debunking of this.
I mean, you really
Um,
can't get it anywhere. Even looking for a counter, even if it's even something to balance what you're hearing against, it's very difficult, which is that's what's interesting to me. Like, the real conspiracy theory is that there's no that this wasn't as elaborate of a conspiracy as everybody thinks, and yeah, I mean, I also don't think people know how much rich people love hanging out with each other and going to their private islands and flying on private jets.
and that's exactly right, especially when you have the magnet of other celebrities being invited there. And rich people like hanging out with celebrities too. So, and Epstein was just a very good schmoozer and a very good networker and a very good manipulator, apparently. Um, and that's
Psychopath.
how he was able to work his way up from college dropout to right hand man for and manager of Les Wexner's office, which is a full time job that turned out to be very lucrative for Epstein. And then once you make that much money from Les Wexner, um, it's easier to get other clients. It's not clear that he had that many other financial clients, but he
Mhm.
liked to lie and say that he did. But even with what he got from Wexner and when he got it and where the market was, just average investing acumen could have made him as rich as he was between what he got from Wexner and what he got from Black. And that alone would do it.
Where do you think this
Um,
all goes?
at this point, I mean, there are lots of people with an interest to keep it alive, right? You have Democrats now are seizing upon this. Um, and calling for investigations and because they see it as a way to sort of split the Republican, get turn people against Trump and make
Oh,
him
it's
less
split.
powerful.
I mean, it's split the Republican Party.
I'm not.
That's
It's far from clear that it's split. It's split online, but
right.
Twitter isn't reality.
It isn't
And
reality, but I will say I think that, and I've said this
but
many times
yes,
before, it's
the
influential.
podcast world is really upset, right?
Yeah.
And that was just extraordinary to me. The only Joe Rogan show I've ever listened to, Peter Thiel's on there getting interviewed by Joe Rogan. Oh, I want to hear what Peter Thiel has to say. And they ended up talking about Epstein for an hour, and it was all the the same BS I've been refuting for years. And um,
Peter Thiel was talking about Epstein?
yeah,
Oh,
on Rogan,
I've never
and
heard that one.
but I mean, this is like a year ago, right?
Okay, yeah.
This is in 2024,
Interesting.
and but they've completely bought into the conspiracy theory. And Jake Tapper, after the report comes out, says, "Oh, this is a cover up." He's completely bought into the conspiracy theory, and whether and that's just a combination of the narrative has not been contradicted, and the narrative is just completely false. And the true crime documentarians, this is a much more interesting story if you can assume that there's something shadowy and conspiratorial going on. That's a much more interesting story than you have this creepy old man getting teenage massages and recruiting other teenagers to do it. Um,
Mhm.
it's much more interesting if it's run by the CIA or Mossad.
Mhm.
And so so the podcasters absolutely have the incentive to keep the story going.
I
Uh,
also feel like there were a lot of them that were really wrong about Iran and had got egg on their face being so wrong about that, and this is a way to kind of go get
Right, and
vengeance.
that's the other story, right? There's like nothing. The only thing tying Epstein to Israel is that one of his frequent visitors is Ehud Barak, who was on the left, by the way, who's like very anti-Netanyahu, and if he had been in charge, there would have been a ceasefire and a two-state solution and everything. But Ehud Barak was a frequent visitor to Epstein's facilities and planes and townhouses and whatnot. Um, but if you're anti-Israel, sort of trying to use the Epstein thing and trying to tie, the the Tucker Carlson speech recently is a very good example of this, and turning Epstein into an anti-Israel screed and then an anti-billionaire screed, and whether Carlson's going to run for office himself as like some sort of super populist. I'm more populist than Trump. And I'm the one who's really going to get down to the bottom of Epstein, and that will be interesting. What's he going to find that Patel and Bongino would have loved to have found but couldn't. And so you write the other conspiracy theory is, the CIA came in and
Destroyed it.
destroyed all the
Yeah,
evidence.
yeah, I've heard that one too.
And well, that's non-falsifiable until it's provable if some CIA guy comes forward and says I destroyed all the evidence, and um, but that's just non-falsifiable.
Hmm.
And historically, the CIA has not been that good at destroying evidence. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really been fascinating to kind of watch it all play out, and I'm interested to see even in the next week or 2. I feel like right as I was coming into the interview you, there was, stuff breaking that they're gonna release more stuff, and, I
right,
don't
Democrats are demanding releasing the files, and Patel and Bongino and DOJ their hands are tied in a certain sense because a large chunk of the Epstein files is stuff that's like grand jury testimony, and you're
right.
just simply not allowed to release that.
Yeah, I had a
Um,
friend who is a lawyer, and she's like, "You even if the names are redacted, there's stuff that would, it's just to protect the victims because you can discern who they are just by statements, and you can't let this all out. People will figure out who they are, and then they'll be harassing them forever, and, so some of it is just witness protection, and,
and
he
then others are just you have Joffrey naming everybody under the sun, and is it fair to them to get dragged through the mud like that?
even,
Um,
what's his name was saying to release them, Spacey on Twitter right before I logged in. He had said, like, "I'm all
well,
for it."
yeah, because I mean, people like Dershowitz and Spacey, who are sort of implicated but not implicated, are happy to have more records come out because the records will clear them.
Right.
Um, and right, when if all of the names that Virginia Giuffre lists come out, you'll have some people saying, "Aha, 87 celebrities must have raped her," and others will say, "Okay, this woman is nuts."
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder if it'll ever die. It's just so fascinating, and I'm
well,
grateful.
some people are just never going to be satisfied because
No.
the truth isn't going to satisfy them. So they're always there's always more to dig, and we just need to get somebody who can't be bought, like Patel and Bongino,
And everyone apparently.
and everyone apparently.
What's your biggest defective character?
Mine?
Yeah, I ask the same 2 questions at the end of every podcast.
Uh, I mean, I have a short lifespan. I don't know.
That's one. Yeah. What's your biggest asset?
Um, I think a skepticism and a willingness to admit when I'm wrong, and to sort of question myself, and question what I'm being told, and to change my mind when new evidence comes in.
What's something that you've changed your mind about that when new evidence came in that you can think of?
Um, I thought Citizens United was correct when it came down, and I'm less certain of that now.
What's
Uh,
Citizens United for people who
that's a Supreme Court case that was very controversial at the time, and still is.
what was the
Um,
ruling in that?
that's the one that said corporations have free speech
Mhm,
rights.
mhm.
Um, I think I've become more sympathetic to the plaintiff's bar than I was when I was a defense attorney. Um, there's some esoteric issues about Article 3 standing that I've changed my mind on.
Interesting.
Those are all just weird legal questions that are very hard to get into in a short podcast.
Yeah,
But
those are good.
all right,
Well, thank you for your, diligence and coming on the podcast and talking about, trying to make sense of something that is truly it's, yeah, his story doesn't really help with the conspiracy Epstein, so and neither does the entire current climate that we are living through. So I appreciate your voice in the world in terms of just trying to ground it in some reality, as boring as it might be to
I mean, I
count.
guess one thing I changed my mind on was Trump, in that, I didn't vote for him in 2016, and thought to myself, I will never vote for this man. And uh, did actually vote for him in 2024. Um,
I
the,
did
the,
too.
uh, and 2016 me would have been very surprised by that vote, but
I always joke
that's
about
how
that. I
bad
say
I'm sorry.
no, go on.
Oh, it just 2016 Ted would have been very surprised by that vote in
Yeah.
2024, but that's how bad the Democratic Party had gotten, that it
Yeah, I
wasn't
always
even worth
joke that
casting a protest vote.
yeah, no, I can totally identify with that. I always joke that if 2016 Bridget had known that 2024 Bridget was gonna vote for Donald Trump, I would be like, "Oh, so I lose my mind in the future." That's unfortunate. Is there any way to stop that? It's not something I could have foreseen either, and I changed my mind on it. This Epstein thing is weirdly, I don't know what effect it's having on me regarding Trump. I it feels like it's just very strange. The whole thing's strange, and it's weird to
I
see
mean, to
people who are
me,
so pro-Trump kind of turning on Trump and over this, when I'm like, we all like, this has gone through 2 administrations. It's just weird to me. Like, this is the thing you're gonna, like, burn down
well,
your
if you
whole
believe that
coalition?
there's this cabal, and and you supported Trump because you bought into the whole QAnon thing, that Trump was the promised one to bring JFK Jr. back, and prosecute all the cabal, and he hired people who said that they were going to do that, and then they all say, oh nope, nothing to see here, and
Right.
then give such a poor explanation of it. And it's very hard for them to explain it, because they have to admit that they were wrong, that
Or
they
that
had
they were
not,
just, like, using it to get clicks and attention, and
or
they
that they were using it to get, I don't know, I mean, there are people who very sincerely believe in this, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
don't think Peter Thiel is using it to get clicks and attention. I think, from what he's heard, he has rationally concluded that there must have been something weird going on with intelligence, or what have you, that made Epstein get away with much more than he's been accused of. Um, Joe Rogan probably honestly believes it too. I don't think anybody's ever confronted him with the counter story. And the administration is not confronting them with the counter story. They're not telling the story. And
Well, that's weird too. It
but
doesn't help.
they've never been very good at telling their story. It's
Yeah.
always been, I'm Donald Trump and I say so.
Right.
And so I flipped the script and I've
Yeah.
completely shifted on X or Y, and
Are you there?
his fans have always gone along and said we've always been at war with East Asia, and so it's good that we're doing this. And the Epstein thing is different somehow, and he's trying to say, okay, nothing to see here, stop talking about it. And instead of saying, guys, I was wrong, but Trump never says, guys, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm. No.
And Patel and Bongino, for whatever reason, can't bring themselves to say it either. And the messaging, I think, is getting lost because it's boring to say, well, Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 6 says I can't release the grand jury transcripts. But well, there are all these videos, but the videos are of Epstein molesting teenagers, and we're not going to release those. So just and people honestly don't understand. They're like, oh, Maxwell was convicted of trafficking, so there must have been a bunch of Johns. But you go to the trial, you go to the indictment, she was convicted of trafficking to Epstein.
Right.
And so the things that everybody are saying that make this so unbelievable, they're just not understanding the premise of what actually happened. They think that Epstein was intelligence, because they've been told by all this reporting that just repeated the other reporting that Aosta said he was intelligence when Aosta never said that. So, and now you have people like Tucker who are just deliberately putting forth misinformation for their own political or podcast purposes.
Everyone's chasing that. Everyone's chasing it. Well, thank you so much.
You have Democrats doing that too now. Also.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Now everyone's going to jump in on the bandwagon, and it's lucrative. And if the young people are believing it, and the podcasters are shifting it, the attention to that, then everyone kind of chases that because that's where the relevance and money and the eyeballs are.
And Trump is such a polarizing figure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for years I've been joking that the best way to get rid of socialism is to have Trump endorse it, because then everybody will change their minds. But and then all the academics will have to say, "Oh, socialism, it smells of Trump. I can't touch that." And so now being rational about Epstein is tied to Trump, and that gives a lot of people an incentive to be irrational about it.
And it's just funny, like all these people who kind of came out of the woodwork and voted for him, and now they want to kind of pivot back, or some, out back to the left or to the center, away from distance. I see a lot of people kind of using it to distance themselves from it. So it's like, I feel so betrayed by him. Like, you're an idiot if you voted, like, you're dumb. You're just dumb if you I voted against the left, and I clearly was like, I did not vote for Trump. I just see him as kind of someone's got to stop this insanity, or at least make a point to try. And I don't think that like, I'm with you. I think he's a great con man, and I wasn't like, oh, I believe everything this guy says. It's just like everyone's like, he betrayed me. I'm like, why are you talking about Trump like he's a lover who lied to you? It's so weird.
I mean, For years I was making the joke that Trump's been in office for 4.5 years and Ted Cruz's father still walks free. And somehow that joke has become reality now, except it's Epstein instead of JFK. But I always thought Trump's allegations about Clinton and Epstein just carried the same weight with me about Trump's allegations that Ted Cruz's father killed JFK. And which is something he said in 2016 that, he was involved in the JFK. And it was just, the birth certificate nonsense. And it's just things Trump says because he will go after his political opponents with anything he can grab. It makes him a very humorous figure, but Trump doesn't believe the stuff he's saying, and he's saying it with a wink almost. And so I think he's
it would be
surprised
funny
by
if this was like the thing that took him down. This is like ends up being his
there'd be a
Achilles
certain
heel.
irony about it, but
A
it wouldn't
huge
be healthy
irony.
for the country in any direction.
Well, thank you.
I mean, who do we get in the Republic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Vance has to stand by this, right? So he's not going to break with Trump with this. So, right? If you're upset by constitutional conservatives, what do you see? What comes after them? But if you're upset by Trump,
we get Tucker.
And you end up with Tucker, and he's really going to get to the bottom of the Epstein thing. That's not good either. So,
well, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for being a voice out there. And where can we find you online?
At Ted Frank on X and HLLI.org for our legal work, which is interesting.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating, actually. I
love to be back to talk about it.
Definitely. No, we covered a lot of ground. I think it's good to even get some kind of counter to like at least there's some counter out there that exists somewhere in the world. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.